When one thinks of the perfect movie, many things can spring to mind. Exquisite cinematography, poignant performances, compelling characters, any number of things that would leave an audience at a loss for words. Any number of things that would leave critics raving. Any number of things that would make the movie an instant classic. But one thing that likely does not spring to mind is this.
Tommy want wingy.
But this, dear viewer, is cinematic perfection. Tommy Boy is a movie about a boy named Tommy. Well, Chris Farley is 31 at the time of filming, but despite his longevity, the character Tommy Callahan is still very much a child. He is puerile in his sensibilities, and while this mentality is off-putting to some of those around him, it is endearing to others. This prolonged adolescence, and the consequences thereof, are ameliorated by the wealth and business savvy of Mr. Callahan's father, Mr. Callahan. And Tommy is allowed, if not encouraged, to maintain his laissez-faire attitude towards life. All this changes the night of Mr. Callahan's wedding, when he has a heart attack, dying and leaving the fate of his business, and by extension the town in which this business resides, in peril. This turn of events gives Tommy Boy the opportunity to take up his father's sword, and he does just that. With the fate of the company, his legacy, and a town of people in his hands, Mr. Callahan opts to take Mr. Callahan's sales route in order to protect that which he loves. Along for the ride is Richard, a snarky, standoffish nerd. This nerd, however, is a wealth of technical knowledge, an area in which Tommy is sorely lacking. And so, the duo hits the road, their sights set on salvaging the fate of Callahan Automotive. Initially, this endeavor goes poorly, but with time, Tommy, and to a lesser degree Richard, comes into his own and begins making sales. So many sales, in fact, that they succeed in their quest for capital. That is, until their efforts are thwarted by Rob Lowe and his fictional mother/girlfriend, the antagonists of the film. This dastardly duo has been scheming on the Callahan estate since the start of the film. And just as Tommy Boy succeeds in his quest, the villains succeed in theirs. Mr. Lowe fudges some numbers on a computer, and all of the sales that Tommy Boy had just made, all of the success that he had just had, is all for naught. Tommy Boy refuses to accept failure, and ultimately enacts a new plan to save the company. A new plan that works, saving the company, his legacy, and the town. The bad guys are punished for their acts, and everyone lives happily ever after. At first glance, Tommy Boy seems like an average, run-of-the-mill, silly comedy, far from such haughty praise as cinematic perfection. And, to be honest, it is that. This movie is certainly not particularly ambitious in its goals. It's a simple story with some jokes thrown in. But even though it is a simple story, it manages to execute on this flawlessly. The narrative of a lovable doofus coming into his own is far from a novel thing. In fact, it's more or less the premise of almost every comedy to one degree or another. But those movies are not perfect, and Tommy Boy is. Why is that? First and foremost is the sincerity with which the film is made. Even though Tommy Boy has no shortage of silly moments, the moments where it is not silly are depicted earnestly. There are no meta fourth wall breaking style narrative tropes here, just an honest story. An honest story with relatable characters. Characters who take the situation that they are in seriously and emote earnestly. Speaking of the characters, they are phenomenal. Not necessarily the characters themselves, but the portrayal of those characters. Tommy Callahan, in the hands of any other actor, could have just as easily come off as an irritating, boisterous buffoon. But in the hands of Chris Farley, well, he still sort of is that, but in the best way possible. Mr. Farley just goes for it in this movie. He doesn't hold anything back in his over-the-top style of physical humor, just as he does not hold anything back in his more earnest moments. This level of dedication to the role, this level of earnestness, elevates the film from simply a goofy comedy to something a bit more. In addition to the singular performance of Chris Farley, the chemistry between Mr. Farley and David Spade is palpable. The dichotomy of the goofy idiot and the snarky nerd is far from a novel concept, but the chemistry between these two real-life friends once again elevates it above its peers. When Tommy and Richard are going back and forth at one another, it feels genuine and low. Once again, we find ourselves back where we started. This movie's sincerity. Many movies are sincere, but still fall short of the perfection that Tommy Boy has achieved. Many comedies have outstanding performances. Many movies have actors with good chemistry. But when comedies are concerned, jokes are king. I watched Super Troopers a while back, not to make a video on, but for the sake of simply enjoying a dumb comedy from my youth. But when I watched it back, it was not as funny as I remembered. Not because the jokes were not good, but because the film had been quoted into an early grave. I've heard every bit 1,000 times over in conversations with friends. So when they play it on screen, their impact was severely diminished, if not completely lost. Tommy Boy also has an abundance of quotable jokes, easily regurgitated amidst some chums over some drinks. Hell, I've adopted holy shnikes into my everyday vernacular. This movie loves a good line, a good quote, a catchphrase. But that is not the only source of comedic relief. In addition to the goofy lines, the holy shnikes of it all, Tommy Boy also features a robust display of physical humor. Tommy is constantly running into things, getting hit by things, falling into things, and so on. And this is inherently funny in a Tex Avery cartoonish style. Smarter men than I have more than likely done the research as to why we find people being hit in the crotch so funny. So I will not pontificate on such a thing other than to say, yeah, watching fictional characters get inconsequentially injured is just inherently funny to most people. And that is what sets Tommy Boy apart from many other movies of this kind. It is diverse in its comedic sensibilities. Not only do we get enough quotable lines to last a lifetime, but we also get this.
It's a lie!
This.
You can get a good look at a T-bone by sticking your head up a butcher's ass, but then, no.
And this.
I can't stop! Help! There's a cliff! And your family's screaming, oh my God, we're burning alive! No, I can't feel my legs!
Many movies reach for the proverbial stars in their attempts to tell a story. They aspire to groundbreaking this or innovative that, but I would be so bold to say that more often than not, they fall short of such lofty ambitions. Tommy Boy has no such ambitions. It is simple, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. What it does, Tommy Boy does well. It doesn't seek to alter the cinematic landscape in any sort of meaningful way, but rather, it seeks to stick to the fundamentals of filmmaking. It knows what it needs to do in service of the story being told, and executes on that flawlessly. Furthermore, it bolsters this minimalist mentality with standout performances all around. A cohesive cast and jokes that run the gamut from witty to puerile. Tommy Boy knows what it is, knows what it's trying to do, and executes on these things exquisitely. And it is this robust understanding of the building blocks of a film that makes Tommy Boy a perfect movie.